so many different creative individuals. So I kind of come in towards the end of a project and photograph it. But up until that point, it's had influence from lighting directors, from the director, from the cast, the crew, obviously the original scriptwriter. So I get to benefit from all of those elements and just come along the end and tie it all together and look like the guy who's produced these amazing pictures, but really it's kind of everybody else's work that I'm photographing. So it's a real honour sometimes, because although it's got my creativity in it, I'm obviously sponging off all the creativity that came before me. Which is quite nice. Just going on to, I mean, sometimes it just doesn't feel much like work, you know, especially production shots. You know, feel very privileged sometimes to photograph a play that, you know, full well several hours later a full audience will be paying to go and see. So it's great to see more theatre than I would ordinarily. Work with a lot of young people, which is always fun. Keeps things fresh and energised. There are cons. There are definitely cons to being a freelancer. It's very much a sort of yin and yang situation, I guess, where you've got benefits and you've definitely got some things that aren't so good. It's not quite as reliable as being being in full-time employment, receiving a wage every month. So some months I know full well it's going to be quite a lean month and I'm not going to get an awful lot of income. The next month might be completely different. It might be 3-4 times as much income. And each month is going up and down according to that, so you have to be prepared to plan over a slightly longer time frame. You have to be prepared to make sure you've got your finances in order, so that, you know, if you have a lean month, that you can cover that, knowing there's more work coming in. So generally you just have to be a little bit more concentrated on finances. Make sure one of the biggest cons, and I'm only now learning to handle that really, is the way the work sort of peaks and troughs all the time. And in the early days, and even now, it's very easy when you hit a trough to think that that's it and you're never going to find work again and it's all over. And then all of a sudden when the work starts coming in, you feel great and you think, wow, this is going to be amazing, and then, you know, everything's going to be fine, and then you go down to the next trough. And it's very hard in the early days not to ride that roller coaster all the time and go up and down and up and down. And as you get a bit more experience, you start to have been there enough times to know that the work will come back or that things will be okay. But in the early days, it's really quite frightening, because it's just, you know, it's just you haven't got a paycheck. If you have a bad week at work, you still know that you're going to get paid at the end of the week. With a freelancer, if you have a bad week or a bad month, then it will hit you in the pocket pretty quickly and pretty soon. Obviously, you know, being good at what you do speaks volumes, especially in an industry that is almost exclusively word of mouth. So, you know, networking and impressing one creative, they'll start telling somebody else, and you can quite quickly jump from building to building or from institution to institution and get good word of mouth that way. So yeah, I mean, it's this sort of simple stuff really. Keeping promises, you know, don't say you're going to do something and not do it. Create a good standard of work. A lot of it's quite, you know, a lot of it's quite dull. A lot of it isn't photography, or not dull as such, but different. You know, it's not. A lot of my working week isn't based around photography. A lot of it is based around running a business. Like I said, keeping up with emails, marketing for the future, so you know that in a year's time you'll be getting work, not just the work you're getting now or next week. And all of the technical and IT issues and one thing or another that comes with running a photography studio or a photography business. It takes a lot of time rather than just, you know, and then the 10% that you're actually taking pictures. There is no room to hide if you're freelance. Otherwise you very quickly notice that the phone stops ringing, the emails stop coming in, and you stop getting the work. So yeah, you really have to bend over backwards, make sure you're a really helpful individual, that you do what you can to help people out with their problems and their projects. Otherwise, yeah, why would anyone recommend me if I just turned up and was miserable and was bad at what I do? Then chances are the referrals won't come. One of the reasons I got into photography in the first place was because I wanted it to be really varied. So, and one of the things I've stuck to is not to do any one specific area. I tend to split my time photographically between photographing in theatres, doing wedding photography, and doing school photography as well. And then on top of that, there are a few other areas or a few other jobs that come in that don't neatly fit into any of those three. So immediately I've got that variety, whereas if I was a full-time employed member of staff, either in a theatre, I might just be doing, you know, just purely theatre photography, which is great, but it would after a while start to feel a little bit samey. Or alternatively, if I was working in a studio doing family portraits, after a couple of weeks, start to see the same things happening day after day after day. And that's one of the reasons I got into photography, was because I didn't want to fall into a rut like that. So I do try and keep it varied. The flip side of that is it's never very secure. You know, obviously the first time you do a project is the most exciting but also the most demanding. So lots of first time projects are great and great fun, but they will leave you tired. So it's great to have that experience over time and to be able to do certain jobs very well, very easily, without necessarily putting all your time and effort in. Whereas if you're doing, you know, different things all the time, you have to, you know, you're continually learning. So having what I found works really well for me is having 2 or 3 areas of expertise that I can kind of build an experience in and a level of comfort, so I don't have to work quite as hard all the time, every day, learning something new, but still allow time in my schedule across the year to do projects that I've never done before, doing a bit of video work or working in sectors or industries that I've never come across before, because it's exciting, it keeps you fresh, and the first time you see new people or new buildings, it always helps to be inspired and be creative. Interesting one, really. I think for me, it really turned the corner when I started to take on school photography particularly, but also the wedding photography as well. Now, this is an interesting lesson that I learned quite early on. School photography and wedding photography were the 2 things that I turned my nose up doing when I got into photography. I thought that they'd be dull and boring and beneath me, or one thing or another. For whatever reason, I wasn't that interested. And over time, not only have I learned to love it, I've also learned to appreciate the regular income. I know going forward that I have work in autumn of this year, for example. Now, before I started doing the weddings and the schools, I would be month by month hoping that my contacts and my networks were such that the phone would ring enough, whereas now I have the security from knowing that I have work booked in the diary. I have a wedding at the moment, this in June 2013, so I have work that's booked well over a year in advance. So that brings a real sense of security to it. And photography in the creative industries generally can be quite hard to get working, quite hard to find that security week by week, day by day, month by month. But if you can find sectors, as I've managed to do, that rely on a bit of forward planning, then you can find security in a job that is inherently quite insecure when you compare it to a monthly paycheck. And I love it. I really, really love it.